A lot of people are not ready to put in the effort because it takes a
Right.
lot of effort. We cut everything that is self-congratulatory, self-posting. Everybody can write well-researched, lengthy pieces. That's not what makes you special anymore. We should not confuse length with depth. Is this really fucking good or is not? And what is bullshit content? A lot of people think is good content. Roundup posts such as that there is not a story. This strategy does not bear fruit. If any idiot can go and order 20 of these on UpWork, it means the barrier of entry is just too low. Every time you push the standards, there's a cost. There's a time cost, there might be a monetary cost. And sometimes it's pure fucking luck, man. It needs to be hard to do. Hard is a moat, I think, in content. If it's hard to create, it's a moat.
Tell me a little bit about your content marketing philosophy and how it has evolved over time.
Yeah. So I got serious about content marketing more than 10 years ago when I started my conversion optimization agency, today known as Spiro. And if you're in the business of expertise, like people buy you because you know a lot about something, then content marketing plays an essential role. Obvious truth, right? So from the get go, I set for Conversion Excel back in the day content strategy that was that every single post needs to be the best post ever written about this very specific narrow subject. So if we want to talk about how to run multivariate tests and why, it needs to be the best post on this ever made. So that was the guiding post. So in the beginning, it was practitioner-led content, meaning I myself was writing some select practitioner guest posters. But then when I hired let's say writers, and Tommy Walker was the first professional editor writer for the Conversion Excel blog, then how do we scale these standards to non-subject matter experts? So Tommy is not a conversion optimization expert yet. The bar was the content needs to be the best in the world level content about A/B testing, conversion optimization, things like that. So then we needed to get more specific about what are these guidelines, what makes a post the best in the world. And largely we bucketed these into three types of rules. So some were SEO based rules, rules about content length, because back in the day, it was like there was compelling data that Google favored articles that were like 2,000 words or more, and those articles got more backlinks and then better rankings. These days, this is less important, or now I hear even that Google D ranks or the blog post over 2,000 words because nobody wants to read those, which is true. Then guidelines for readability. It needs to be well structured, like paragraphs, and can't be a wall of text. And then the content, which is every claim you make needs to be backed up with a case study, example, scientific research, things like that. So whatever we're saying, everything is like factual and always featuring the best in the game experts. Then how do you weave those quotes into the story, balancing arguments from opposing sides, things like that. So, and that was the strategy that we chose in like 2011, more or less, and it was working basically right away. Basically working right away, and CXL built its whole business on top of the blog using this content strategy. And since then, we've also taken the same approach at so CXL at some point split into Spiro, which is the agency, and CXL, which is the e-learning business. Both use the same basic content strategy, and now practicing the same at Winter. So if you're in the business of building a new category, a movement, you have a point of view about stuff, this strategy, I think, works well.
And you've been a lot into differentiation lately. Tell me about how you got from that point where, the original idea was to be better than everybody else in the search. But now it's this idea of not just be better objectively, but also uh, be completely different and unique. How's that complete?
I think what has changed over the last 10 years is that a whole bunch of things got commoditized, not just products, services, and companies, but also content. Everybody and their mother jumped on the content marketing, ship and started crafting excellent, high quality content. So when in 2011, with Conversion Excel, started to write high quality content, long form articles, we were one of the few blogs that did that. Most were writing 300-word opinion pieces. But now, today, you just can't write high quality content anymore because everybody can write high quality content, well researched, lengthy pieces. That's not what makes you special anymore. So today, solely this strategy does not bear fruit. So what you also now need is you need something that makes your content different. It makes you stand out. So it could be personality. It could be the format of how this content is presented. If you look at like these guys at growth.design, uh, but essentially it's content, but it's presented as a clickable case study. Nobody else does this. Totally unique, stands out. Or if you look at like Harry Dry, right? Everybody's favorite guy, marketing examples, doing these. He has a unique format of communicating, right? So unique packaging is one thing, or you have a unique authoritative voice. One of my favorite examples is if you look at the blog of Reforge, Brian Fulford and friends, they don't publish often, but every single piece is an article you want to bookmark. And the articles that they write cannot be replicated by any content writer. No content writer in the world can write Reforge style articles. And why is that? Because it's heavily based on real world experience. I've been doing this for 20 years. This is my point of view. And I've maybe deduced it into a framework, a formula, something um, where like a true subject matter expertise shows up, uh, which is why you want to go to Reforge blog any day. Like every piece is gold.
And at what point did you really start to get into this space, right? Like differentiation's always been the sort of the overarching theme, right? You always wanted to get to that point, but once
Mhm.
it started to evolve to this was table stakes and everybody was doing this. And I was there when we were doing that, and it was 1,850 words minimum, new image every three
Mhm.
paragraphs, right? Like there were some
Mhm.
very, very tough standards there. That was what the differentiation was at that point.
Mhm.
When you were looking at the evolution of what was going on, when was that no longer enough in your mind? Like, and what was the research process, I suppose, that looked like started going into that? Because how to do it, how to differentiate, there's a lot more in it than just having good ideas.
Totally. And I got interested in differentiation not for content reasons, but for like business differentiation reasons, because I was wrestling this very common business problem of, is my business sufficiently differentiated? Like running a CRO agent's like, okay, we're like we do really great work, but if you look at like the services we offer and so on, I mean, so many companies offering the very same thing. And so like, okay, so differentiation maybe in this case is not about what we do, because anybody can say that they also do this, but it's like how you do it, and it's the personality. I mean, a lot of people came to our agency because of me, because I had built like a name, a following, people trusted me. So it's like, wow, these subjective things, like a visible founder that maybe some people like, can be a reason why people choose you, which is the core of differentiation, the point of differentiation. Why turn to you over all these other people, sources, companies, right? So I was solving differentiation problems at the business level for the agency, for CXL, the e-learning business, and constantly thinking about it. And then I was buying heaps of books on differentiation, also learning that there are actually very few available, and at least very few good ones. And I really got into the subject myself. And then at the same time, and this is about, let's say, 2018 to 2020, that time range, when I noticed like we had been running the same, let's say, content playbook for almost 10 years, like 7 years. And we started noticing that our, even like on SEO wise, our traffic was flat. We weren't growing as fast as we used to. And when asking people, hey, what are your favorite blogs then? And like, what do you like to read and so on, we started to come up less often. And that's, you always want to be somebody's favorite blog, right? Or favorite whatever media channel. There's a huge value in there, being like named. If somebody asks a recommendation, that your name comes up. And we were being, and by we I mean the CXL blog was represented less and less. And that was like, we've become less relevant. And why is that? Because we've been running this playbook that is less relevant. It's outdated. And why people run outdated playbooks? Because it used to work like gangbusters, and then you want to ride on the success, and you don't want to break the boat that's working, right? Yeah. And so that was kind of how we got into how I got into this differentiation thing.
Tell me a little bit more about the podcast, because this is one of those situations where you could have done a podcast years ago, and the
Mhm.
premise of how to win is a little bit different than what's out there, especially in it's very easy to get into an interview style
Totally.
conversation and have the same conversations over and over again. Tell me about what that process looked like for you
Mhm.
doing the research to create a podcast, a format that's very common, doubly common with interviews. What did that look like to do something that was different than what everybody else was doing?
The basic principle behind anything in marketing, in business, doesn't matter, in life, is that what's easy to do, a lot of people will do. If the barrier of entry is low, like it doesn't require much effort, there's a lot of noise, a lot of competition. So I wanted to do a podcast for years. What held me back was not that I didn't believe in podcasting. Sure, I did. I just didn't want to do yet another podcast that has the very same guests that everybody else has, which is like 99% of podcasts. And it's just interview style, and it's very chatty. Like people maybe have inside jokes, and just as a podcast listener, I can't stand this podcast to talk about nothing. And I wanted to do a podcast, and so like how it needs to be different. It needs to be different. So many podcasts is pure filler, right? Because there's no editor. There's no editor that comes in and cuts 30% of what you talked about, right? Because they publish the whole thing, because that's the easy thing to do. So number one is like, okay, I'm gonna have an editor, and we're gonna cut most of it. And second thing is like, well, also I want to communicate my point of view, and so on and so forth. And so I formulated actually three concepts for what the podcast might be like, three formats. And what I wasn't sure about was A, what people will enjoy listening to, and B, what I enjoy creating. Because if you get into a podcast, there's zero business impact after episode 4, right? Like, I mean, you need to stay in this game for the longest time, and you need to enjoy the process yourself. It needs to be sustainable. And so I recorded some, I want to say 10 episodes of podcasts that are never used, trying out different formats. I had high profile guests. These episodes have never been published because it's like, I came to the conclusion this format is not working. It's not working for me. The audience is kind of like, eh. And then I stumbled upon this. Well, not to stumble. This was my hypothesis for one format, is that I profile a company's growth story from inception to today, from through the perspective or of strategy, which not a lot of companies are talking about. Also being intrinsically interested in it, and
Mm.
then I have a lot of, because I'm interested in strategy and I'm also a practitioner, I have a lot of thoughts on my own. So if you're just interviewing guests, it's like you're just the mic, you're just a reporter, and everybody else is the smart guy. I also want the podcast to uplift me, right?
Right.
That's why key reason why I do the podcast. And so I came to this format where I add commentary and my own uh, thoughts on top of their narration. I record a 1 hour episode with a guest. I cut 30 minutes of conversation. Whenever I ask them a question, I also cut my questions, and out of their answers, I cut like most of what they said and just leave in the juicy bits. So there's a lot of editing that goes on, and yeah, now it's differentiated. And if you look at this is just attribution, qualitative attribution. If people ask, hey, what are your favorite marketing business podcasts? How to Win keeps on coming up more and more often.
So almost an answer to what was going on over at CXL once it started to plateau. And that's one of the reasons why I wanted to do this show and the way that we do this show, because it is like you don't get the behind the scenes thinking on a lot of where these people are coming from. What the common thread is between this and CXL is the editing, right? The premise is unique, but it's the editing. If you're cutting out 30 minutes of your conversation, only leaving the juicy bits and giving your commentary, it's just a little extra step that makes it so it's way more valuable to the listener. So let's use the podcast as an example. Let's talk about your pregame into the editing process.
With my editor, we've agreed upon certain principles, because I think editing needs to be principles based, because otherwise you can't micromanage all these possible scenarios and things that come up. So a principle might be no greetings, no like back and forth, haha banter, no like relationship building conversation. All of that cut out. So whenever the editor sends me a pre-edited file and I further cut another 30%, then they've cut out all this, like where I say, hey, how's it going, man? Yeah, nice seeing you. Like none of that. Or hello, thanks for being my guest. It's my pleasure to have you on the show. Nobody wants to hear that shit, right? It's all being cut out. Second thing is like the content needs to be something that people can follow. So often guests just plug themselves, right? Because we're talking about their company. Obviously, they say, "Oh, I have great talent and so good people, and like we're changing the world and helping the people." That's nice, but it's uninteresting. We're cutting all of that stuff. So another principle is like we cut everything that is self-congratulatory, self-boasting. I mean, some of it is there was true, like revenue growth and what they did, and so, but we like whatever is just doesn't seem to be valuable or like replicable, we just cut it. And then I get it, and then while I'm interviewing the guests, I'm making mental notes where, ooh, this is really interesting what you say. Wow, that's a great observation. Whereas sometimes I'm like, the person is telling me something, I'm like, this is fucking boring, you know. I'm definitely not gonna feature this in the show. I already know during the conversation. Also, sometimes, and you don't know this in advance, the guest has nothing interesting to offer. So I have had multiple. So the premise of my podcast is like you got this company above $10 million in revenue, which is no easy feat. How did you do it? What did you do? What was special? And sometimes the guest is no fucking idea. We think we have a blog, and yeah, and then I'm like, well, this guy's clueless. And I asked the question: is it luck or is it like strategy? And sometimes it's pure fucking luck, man. It's because like you're delivering a service, whether with a lot of demand, right? And so you being there at the right timing, which is also part of luck, is huge. And then what do I do with this episode? I don't publish them at all. And a lot of people publish every episode because I recorded it, right? It was hard to get that guest on my show. But and so being aware of sunk cost fallacy, it's like, oh yeah, of course I want to publish it because I put in the work, but is not good enough. My standard is here. And obviously, still not all the episodes are friends. I have episodes that are better than others. It's inevitable, I think. Or it's not inevitable. Actually, I think I would make a claim that if I would up my editorial standards even further, if I would want to put up even more effort, I could have every episode be killer. But then that comes with a cost, right? Every time you push the standards, there's a cost. There's a time cost. There might be a monetary cost. Podcast is not making money for me, right? Other things in my life are making money. So there's a limit to how much time I can put in, justify putting in. So my standards are, I think, good enough, but could be better.
I think that's something that's really important too, is that knowing that threshold. At the end of the day, it's your brand, right? You're the host, and everything that you're doing
Yeah.
represents what you're trying to accomplish here. We have a question in here where it says, "How have you managed the expectation of your guests so they don't have issues when their thoughts are cut?"
I'll just say, like, a lot of this will be edited in post production. The people that I each feature on my show is not the first really. I only feature founders and CEOs who do a lot of presentations, webinars, conference talks. They don't give a shit.
You got to bring people on who have that understanding just in general that this isn't going to make
Mm.
it. I know that with certain articles, I've told people before, I can't, I can't do this. Earlier in my career, especially when you and I were working together,
Mhm.
the the schedule was really important to me. Sometimes to the point where I'd re-edit entire pieces because the idea, the kernel of the idea, was good, but the
Mhm.
the writing itself was not. And I think that there's also, just to add to that, because, we're saying keep standards high, right? We have that in the chat because people leaving people out of boredom doesn't come back. I think it's important to keep in mind what's worth putting the extra effort into. That's always up to whatever the time is worth. What are some of the most important unbreakable rules in your internal writing guidelines for authors that help CXL and Winter create such amazing content? That's a question from Nikita.
The key thing is like, is it actually really fucking good? All right. So in CXL guidelines, it still says you're writing the best article ever written on this particular topic. Right? So it's a mindset thing. So if that is the expectation that I need to deliver, like you gotta try harder. You're gonna try to do a better job. I have personally written for external publications where they also communicated to me, like high standards, or I had tremendous respect for these outlets myself. Like, and then I just gave my all, and like I was really proud of my output. Now that I look back at the article, I'm like, my standards have risen still, but back in the day, it like I gave it all, and yeah,
As an editor, you have to understand what the best on the subject means. I think it's really easy to say, I want the best on the subject,
yeah,
but I think it's really difficult to also put in the mental work to do it. I mean, it's like you said, if it were easy, everybody would do it. Right.
totally. A lot of people are not ready to put in the effort because it takes a
Right.
lot of effort, right? Yeah, and if you remember, Stephen King has written this book, I think it's called On Writing, and he's like
Mhm.
published 70 books or something. Like he's one of the most prolific writers of all time. And his basic premise is like to be a good writer, you need to also be a good reader. You need to read a lot.
Mhm.
So in order to know whether a piece is the best in the world quality, and this is like different in everybody's line, whatever that means, uh, you need to know what that looks like. Like if I read it, like if I'm a subject matter expert, I know if it's like vague bullshit or it's like, yeah, good shit. Or also I need to read external content, not something that I haven't published to know, well, wow, look at these guys. These guys are writing some good stuff. Like one example that comes to mind is like First Round, the VC firm. They have like a
Mhm.
blog, SaaS venture stuff. I'm like, holy shit, that's good shit. Like I'm looking at it, and then so you see what good looks like. Or I talked about the Reforge blog. So you need to be a good reader to know what content is out there to know that it's good. And also, you also need to know what is bullshit content that a lot of people think is good content. So if I have a writer and I always, when I interview them, it's like, hey, what blogs are you read? Who do you think is doing a really good job? And maybe who's also a smaller brand, not like, a million, yeah, not a million is small business, but like $1 billion brand, like doesn't apply if they have unlimited budget. You need to have certain standards and certain savviness to know that it's all bullshit. Right? Like it sounds like, oh yeah, it's very thorough and all that stuff, but it's crap, right? And so if you can't tell the truth, sorry, can't tell the difference, you just you're not ready to write for me.
When I do an audit now, I tell the people that I work with, like, my primary job here is to read 200 of your articles if you have 200 articles, and then read as many pieces within your industry and then adjacent to all of that, because you have to know and understand what's going on in the space if you want to find those places where you can jab and say things that nobody else is saying, so you can open them up when you do have to go toe to toe, because you're always going to have to. But like,
Mm.
how are you going to do that and make it different and build that trust and narrative over time? We got two questions here, and then we're going to jump into the article. And the reason I picked this article for you is because it's sort of the inverse of what we're talking about here. I did that very much on purpose, and especially with a subject that you know a lot about. Someone says, do you have a particular process for vetting and testing writers' skills before working with them, especially freelancers?
Absolutely. I mean, the main thing is like I tell them, send me the best article you have ever written about this broad subject, or like top two. And if they send me, here's 50 links, I say, no, 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 I'm not gonna read fucking 50 pieces. Send me the best. Quite often they just say, actually, nothing is actually very good, or they send me their link, and I'm like, no, please. There's just no way I'm gonna work with you because it's just crap. And people, oh, well, it's what the customer wanted. Okay, fine, sure, but write your own fucking article, right? Like, just write something for a portfolio. Write something that you're proud of, and then I give them a link to an article that I have written that I think is good. Let's say, can you write a piece like this? 90% of people are like, no, I'm not ready to put in that kind of work. Um, and so that's one thing. So let's say that I look at the article like, this is promising. This they might be able to write. Then it's the standard thing. Pitch me an outline, uh, and then send me a draft. And then I look at the draft. Um, and I mean, I guess I can go into the piece when we start looking at the editing portion.
Yeah. I've stolen a lot of that from you. That was one of the major things when I started hiring people is I said, give me your three best articles. And then I would go into a deep edit with one of them, knowing that there were no stakes in the game for the person who would do it. Cause I wanted to also understand how it was that they would respond to my edits, because there are two parts to that, right? One, are you any good? And then two, can you take feedback? People who couldn't take the feedback, especially when there was no risk, it's like you clearly don't
Yeah,
want to push yourself a little bit further because I'm going to push you, period.
exactly. Yeah.
We have one more question here and then we're going to jump into the edit, which is how important is the amount of time given to the authors and how do you communicate timeframes? I've got some ideas on this too.
So I think it varies based on what is my relationship with these people. If it's my in-house writer, I have a set cadence, because like without cadence is like if they write 2 articles a year, is that good? Did they earn their salary? I don't think so. So there needs to be cadence. If it's an agency that is, I'm using an outsourced writing content agency, right? Then there's also a set deliverable. I'm paying a certain monthly fee in exchange for a certain number of articles. Maybe it's 4 a month or 8 a month or whatever it is. So then the cadence matters. If it's just a rando freelancer that chips into my process and say, "Hey, I also want to write an article," I don't give a shit about deadlines. Personal, like I don't care, because my main cadence is going. I have an agency or in-house writer or writers who are responsible for cadence, and then then like whenever you get to it, I don't care. I pay you when it's done. Right.
Most of my teams have always been freelance authors, and the cadence is important. And when it comes to the quality, there's this give and take. It for me, it always comes down to passion, right? Are you willing to put the work in to also try to get the highest quality pieces possible out in the time frame that I give you, right? And it might be, a week, 2 weeks, depends on what the cadence of the
Mhm.
overall publication is going to be. But like when we were working together, it was 2 posts every week, every Tuesday and Thursday, and they had to be the highest quality possible. And if that meant as an editor, I was spending extra time on a Monday, like putting what I had into it, I would also expect that from the author on the other side of the equation. And from what I've found is that when you care, somebody else cares. And it's really easy to sleepwalk through all of this and be more beholden to the cadence than the quality. And you have to pay attention to both. You have to care deeply about both because then your writing is going to be much better every single time because you're trying to make it so that first draft is going to be the thing that gets accepted. Let's jump into the piece. Now, the reason this article was picked specifically, I took it from I don't normally do this, but I took it from a much larger publication with a lot of brand equity behind it. And I picked it because I know you know the subject very well. And it's one of those situations where it sounds good, but where's the actual substance to it? So take it away.
Yeah, so let's say that I hired a writer and or it's whoever submitted a piece. Maybe I requested it. Maybe I wanted an article on the topic of key performance indicators, right? And and I mean, it's a shitty topic to start with, because but I guess there's some SEO, keyword volume for it, and so first thing I would do before going into line by line edits is that is this piece even good? Like, is it worth my time going into line edits here? Like, do I start nitpicking about this? After all, to be successful, I mean, I would cut the shit out of this. Like, this is just terrible writing. Um, but like before I invest my time in it, like, does it even have anything? Okay, so I would just quickly scan through it and see if this overall looks high quality, the best in the world, right? And so the topic is KPIs, key performance indicators. Okay. I hate these kind of things. Read on, dear reader. It's like, oh, terrible. I mean, I'm already biased negatively against it based on these kind of things, right? Just state the facts, man. Okay. KPIs can help measure performance at any strategic level. Who speaks like that is not written for humans, I think. And look at the subheads. What is key SEO? I don't know what this is. Same as metrics. Yes, they are. They have a clear difference, really. I mean, yeah, I mean, all KPIs are metrics, but I don't care about all metrics. Some metrics are key performance indicators for me. But if I had a look at this article already, the person who's writing this has no fucking idea, has no clue, and giving is coming to wrong conclusions. Is coming to wrong conclusions. To help understand the difference between KPI and metric, look at the SEO KPI examples. As you can see, KPIs are clearly defined to help achieve specific out. On the other, metric is not as clearly defined. Wrong. A metric, by definition, is measuring something specific. So instantly, this would be an instant reject from me because this person does not know what they're writing about. You cannot write stuff that is not true. And if the bar is the best in the world articles, you know, types of KPIs. Okay. Really, the real answer is that the KPI is a metric that moves a business forward, right? It's not complicated, right? It's like it's money, signups, your North Star metrics. You don't need this much acquisition efficient. It's just bullshit bullets added here to add length to the piece, not to add substance. We should not confuse length with depth. Financial indicators, okay. To get your profit margin. Why are we talking about profit margin calculations now here? Um, okay, leading KPIs, lagging KPIs, important concepts. Yet, like this is what I would want to elaborate on. Like you wanna focus on lead metrics more than lag metrics, because revenue is a lag metric. You can't influence it directly. You can't say that next month I'm going to focus on 40% more revenue. No, no, no. Like, what creates revenue? It's like demos booked or whatever your funnel looks like. You need to focus on input activities. It's like if I want to lose 2 pounds of weight, the inputs are the food I put in my mouth, right? So I get like no more Twinkies. So this is an important comment. They don't like obviously don't even get it. They're not able to tell identify what actually is important. Like, and the thing also about KPIs is, right, that KPIs, it's key performance indicators. Like you shouldn't have many. Right? Like you select few. All right, and then it goes on like you have the 27 kinds of. Why does knowing your KPI matter? Okay, sections like this communicate, hey, idiot. Like it's talking down to the reader. I just, I can't even, you know. You can use KPIs to give hints. Who is this for? Like fourth graders? If it's a children's book, I might change my mind. But if this is like for, I would be embarrassed to like publish this. Like I would never publish this. So instead of doing line edits, uh, I would just say like this is complete crap. This is just terrible article, and also clearly written by somebody who knows nothing about the subject matter. Usually, probably writing about toothpaste and then whatever, and it's clearly written for machines, not humans. This article is just trying to rank for the keyword KPI or key performance indicators. It is not designed to actually help a person set the right KPIs. End of rant.
Now, here's a question for you, because this is, I think, symptomatic of an understanding of how content can work within a business from maybe the higher levels all the way down. Um, Now, let's say in a hypothetical scenario, this was part of a big old keyword list, and somebody said, "We need to hit this as a keyword," and your editor doesn't know how to sniff out the BS.
Hmm.
What do you say about that? Because clearly you have to have a subject matter expert or be somebody who
That's
knows
true.
that this is not great.
Yeah. So if we're publishing content at scale, with it's like we need to get 20,000 pieces a month out the door, and we don't care. There could there could be a perfectly reasonable justification for shipping this crap, where maybe we're not known for quality. Maybe we don't even care about it. Maybe we have some other way we're making money. I don't know. There could be a reason why we would consider this a piece acceptable. Now that being said, I think the most effective content marketing is if you're writing about something that you have a niche, right? Like I'm fitness, right? Six pack abs, or I'm like whatever nootropics or conversion optimization. And so if you have a niche, if you have a focus area, your editor better know their shit or have a review board of stuff. So for instance, at CXL, we're producing courses, right? Courses that people pay money for. It's content, essentially. It's content. The person, the people managing the content production pipeline, sourcing instructors, and all that stuff, they're not subject matter experts at all. They're essentially, they know project management. But we have a board of experts who come in to review curriculums and things like that. You pay the money, obviously. So if you have a niche, if you have a fitness focus, you better have a pool of people that can come in and and reviews or these articles. I mean, 10 years ago when I wrote for Smashing Magazine, they paid $500 for somebody to read my article and add notes, a third party person.
Yeah, I was gonna say Smashing Magazine because you referred them to me before for an article I wrote for you that was rejected, which is gonna go into Nicole's question here for a second. Um, but that editorial process was intense because they'd have, I think, 2 or 3 layers where you'd have people pass the first, which was like, "Does this even sound good?" And then it would go up to your panel of experts and like, "Is
Mhm.
this actually good?" Right? Is this something that is truthful in a way? And I think that's something that's important from a relationship building standpoint. Ideally, you're working with a company who has internal experts that you can build that
Yeah.
relationship with and say like, "Hey, is this legit?" Um, I know I've worked on some pieces where I had to run it by a data scientist where I'm like, "This is something we know we need to hit, but
Yeah.
does this sound right?" And then they go and correct it, and then you do your
Totally.
content thing. Nicole says, "Is there a scenario where you would ask a writer to rewrite the article, or would you simply not move forward with it?" I'll let you
Yeah,
answer
and I
that,
mean,
then
in
I'll
my
answer it as
case,
well.
my feedback would be, straight to the point, and I'm never kicking the writer. It's never like I hate you. It's always like how the piece sucks. It's always the critique is always about
Yeah,
the piece. You try to make it as actionable, as specific as possible. Now, I can see whoever wrote this piece. I'll bet $1,000 they are not able to write a better one. It's just there's no hope. However, I'll leave the door open. Prove me wrong. I'm happy
right.
to give you another chance, rewrite it. But like my condition is always I don't pay until I publish. If it's not publishable, if it doesn't meet my standards, I don't publish it. I don't pay. I mean, of course, the writer has the piece; they can sell it to somebody else.
That was one of the reasons why I said you made me cry on a couple of occasions where it was like, if you feel that, and it's subjective, right? If you feel like there's a kernel of an idea there that you can help bring out of the author, right? And this is coming from the editor's standpoint, then you do as you let people know. And I tell people this ahead of time, like, "Hey, I'm brutal as an editor. I'm a nice guy, but I'm a brutal editor." Um, you have to let people know, you give that caveat and then say, "You've got a really good idea here. You're on to something." Or I just say, there are certain points I've said on more than one occasion, "I'm sorry, I can't do anything with this."
Hmm.
Like, I appreciate you putting the time in, but like you said, sometimes you just know it's a lost cause.
Yeah. So
All right.
let me show you a quick piece. I think you had a guest here named Aaron Orendorff,
Yeah.
right? In the show. So,
Yes.
just I was chatting with him on Twitter, and then I found my. Can you see my Twitter?
I'm gonna bring it up. There we go.
Yeah. So this is 2015. Okay, 7 years ago, right? And so like, hey, blah blah blah. I want to make sure you got the Google Doc I sent. This is for the Conversion Excel blog. And I said, added comments in a nutshell needs more specific implementation advice. Needs to be toned down. Too hypey. Make it economy style. It's a good post, but could be awesome, right? So this is a case where I see that there is potential in the post, right? And I don't have the Google Docs where I added the specific comments in there, but this is like you can see whether when a post has is good but could be cr- phenomenal, right? Versus
That's back when
this
Aaron was
garbage.
getting his come up too. Um, that's yeah. That's funny. That's funny. He's come a long way since then.
Totally, we all have.
I would like to I would like to, because you have Winter. Winter is an amazing platform. I would love it if you could show off a little bit of Winter, talk about the feedback loop a little bit, and then we're gonna wrap the whole thing up.
Yeah. So basically, what Winter does is Winter gives you feedback from your specific target audience. So it's not for content marketing purposes.
I got it.
Able to see my screen? Uh,
It's up.
no. Okay. So it's not for content marketing. The use case is for for your website content and so on. But basically, you're writing for an audience, right? You're writing for an audience and you want to know how something lands on them. So you either do a message test where you put your homepage copy or any landing page copy in front of your ICP and see how it lands. Or you're wondering, I wonder what does my buyer, my target buyer, my ideal customer, what do they care about? So I could maybe run this survey. I want to understand their existing pains and desired gains. And so I can just, click whatever, create a new test, and this is a survey, and this is like a template, right? What are the top three pains? How big of a problem is, like whatever problem I'm solving, messaging for you, and so on and so forth. I can add all these questions, right? What is the key KPI, right? What is the KPI here? And once I'm happy with these questions to my target audience, then I can just now choose who is my target audience. And this is the whole beauty of winter now, like a very specific level. Let's say that I'm like looking at data science or demand gen directors, right? And then it's important to me that they are from 50 to this many employees, and then they're like SaaS and whatever, and then I can set that up, and then I would have the answers to these very specific questions from my exact target customers in 12 to 24, 48 hours, right? Usually 24 hours. And so this is insanely fast. You can do basically market research, qualitative research, check what do they think, what do they want, and how my existing stuff, like my homepage, is landing on them and then iterate on a very fast basis. So that's what it is. And of course, your content marketing and your overall marketing, they go in the same step, right? The more you know about the target customer, who you're writing for, the better content you have. If you know their top pains, that's ideation
Yeah.
or content machine, things like that.
Yeah. And that's one of the things that I've used it before, with some client work that I've done, is definitely saying, this is what we know on this side of the house. Now, how can we apply that to certain frameworks that we can build for our editorial standards on this side of the house? If we know that XYZ things are BS, or they think it's BS, let's take that out of our overall sort of broad messaging that we're trying to put out with the narrative that we're trying to build over a longer period of time. Let's see, we've got a couple minutes left here. So I would love it if you could sort of wrap up all of the ideas that we've talked about here, and then we'll end the show.
So we talked about setting standards, editorial standards for, I mean, there's some SEO considerations, obviously, formatting, how's the reading experience, and then the most important is what do we say? And my TLDR would be like, aim to write the highest quality articles because that's how you differentiate. Because if you just hire dude from UpWork to write 2,000 words about a topic, it's going to be guaranteed garbage or like mediocre at best. It's never going to be great. If you want to become somebody's favorite media, whether it's a blog, your podcast, whatever, it needs to be hard. If it's easy to do, if any idiot can go and also order 20 of these on Upwork, it means the barrier of entry is just too low. And it's going to be extremely competitive. Nobody's going to read your article, so it needs to be hard to do. The level of effort you require from your piece of content needs to be, double, triple. The more the better. 10x harder than your average article that you would hire a writer to write. And then you get content, like marketing examples and Harry Dry or Reforge blog, things like that, or How to Win podcast. And when it comes to editing, I mean, just ask yourself: is this really fucking good or is not? And if it's not amazing, don't go into line edits unless you have all the time in the world. In which case, go nuts. The end.
Do the research, find a unique premise, work harder than everybody else.
I mean, hard is a moat. I think in content, if it's hard to create, it's a moat.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, Pat,
Thanks so much for coming on to the show. I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks so much and have a great rest of the day.